The woods behind the old Ravenwood Cemetery had always been a place of unease. Locals avoided it, dismissing the rumors of strange happenings as stories to scare the curious. But beneath the towering pines and brittle brambles, something ancient and forgotten slumbered. No one ventured too far into the woods, and those who did rarely spoke of what they saw, or never returned at all. Lila hadn't intended to wander that far. She had been hiking along the familiar trails, seeking an escape from the noise of her crowded apartment and the weight of her stagnant life. The forest was her refuge, a place where she could breathe and think. But today she had misjudged the fading light. The sun dipped lower, and shadows stretched long and jagged across the ground, guiding her into unfamiliar territory. As she tried to retrace her steps, the stillness of the woods unnerved her. The usual rustling of leaves, the chirping of birds, even the distant hum of the town, all were absent. It was as though the forest had been swallowed by silence. She checked her phone for directions, but there was no signal. Her unease grew as she realized the trail had disappeared, replaced by a carpet of roots and moss. Then she saw it. Between the trees, half buried in the earth, was a wooden hatch, weathered and scarred by time. It looked ancient, the kind of thing no one was meant to find. Against her better judgment, she approached it, her heart pounding in her chest. The air around her felt heavier with each step, the silence pressing down like a weight. She knelt and brushed away the dirt, revealing strange carvings etched into the wood. They were symbols she didn't recognize, their jagged lines almost seeming to writhe under her fingertips. A soft vibration ran through the ground as she lifted the rusted metal latch. The hatch groaned as it opened, releasing a breath of stale, damp air that smelled of decay and earth. She hesitated, staring into the blackness below. A narrow staircase descended into the ground, disappearing into the void. Logic told her to leave it alone, to run back the way she came. But a pull, something she couldn't explain, drew her forward. Clutching her phone for light, Lila began to descend. The steps creaked under her weight, each one amplifying the unnatural silence. The air grew colder, and her breath misted in front of her. At the bottom of the stairs, she entered a cavernous room lined with walls of stone. The carvings from the hatch were etched here too, glowing faintly in the dim light of her phone. In the center of the room was a stone altar, its surface slick with something dark and wet. Around it were skeletal remains, twisted and contorted as if frozen in agony. A whisper broke the silence, faint and distant. Lila spun around, her light darting across the room, but there was no one there. The whisper came again, louder this time, overlapping with others until it became a symphony of voices. She couldn't make out the words, but their tone was pleading, desperate. Her chest tightened as the whispers grew louder, echoing in her skull. She stumbled backward, her foot catching on something. When she looked down, she saw a hand, pale and leathery, reaching out from the dirt. She screamed and scrambled to her feet, but the whispers turned to screams, and the room began to shake. The carvings on the walls pulsed with light, and the ground beneath her shifted. Figures emerged from the shadows, their forms translucent and flickering, their faces twisted in torment. They moved toward her, their mouths opening in silent screams. Lila ran for the stairs, her legs burning as she climbed. The air grew thicker, the voices chasing her, pulling at her mind. She burst through the hatch and slammed it shut, collapsing on the ground as the forest erupted into sound. The wind howling, branches cracking, the distant call of birds returning all at once. She sat there, gasping for air, her hands trembling as she pressed them against the rough wood of the hatch. The carvings were gone, the surface smooth and unremarkable. When she finally found her way back to town, Lila tried to tell someone what had happened, but no one believed her. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers didn't stop. They followed her in her dreams, seeped into the quiet moments of her day. She stopped sleeping, stopped going out, consumed by the haunting pull of the hatch. One night, unable to bear it any longer, she returned to the woods. The silence greeted her as she stepped off the trail, the familiar weight pressing down on her chest. The hatch was waiting, unburied and pristine. Without hesitation, she opened it and descended into the darkness. When the search party found her weeks later, there was no sign of a hatch or stairs, just Lila's body lying in a shallow grave of roots and dirt, her eyes wide open and her face frozen in a silent scream. The whispers, they say, can still be heard in the woods if you listen closely enough.